In a society dominated by social media, at least one group still prefers to remain anonymous. Restaurant critics. Some go to extremes to avoid being recognized. And until recently, they included Adam Platt. In the new issue of New York Magazine, he not only reveals his favorite restaurants for 2014, but also what he looks like. Adam Platt is here this morning with your first television interview. Nice to see you. You've been revealed. You can't eat anonymously anymore.
That photograph.
What about that photograph?
Well, for the record, when I did this photo shoot, and I am not a big photo shoot person, this is my first photo shoot of all time, probably my last, I smiled all the time. I was smiling consistently. That's the picture they chose.
So, Adam, few people like a critic. Why is your job so important?
Well, I think being a critic, for a restaurant critic, the job is important really for two reasons. You really want to show people, sort of tell them what to eat in this really very complicated, chaotic environment, and you want to do it in a way that's entertaining. So that's really basically what I try to do.
And I have to say, as someone who is new to New York, I read this issue and loved it. Loved learning about you, loved learning about the restaurants. I mean, what you do is such a fascinating job. How do you decide what makes a great restaurant, what deserves a good review?
Well,
start with the food.
Well, you start with the food, but the thing about being a restaurant critic is that unlike, say, a book critic or a TV critic or a movie critic, they're all looking at the same thing. They're reading the same book, they're watching the same movie. When you're a restaurant critic, things can change all the time. So it's a highly subjective discipline. So your experience at a restaurant will change depending on what time you eat, depending on what kind of food you eat, depending on whether the chef has a cold that night, depending on what kind of food you happen to like. And so it's what you're making is a subjective argument for this certain restaurant. And what I always say, I make these arguments and I write them, I try to entertain people, and I'm always barraged, especially these days in the sort of, the madness of the sort of social media. Well, that restaurant was horrible, I hated that restaurant, you're a fool. And I say, you're right. Okay, it's your opinion.
I too love that piece and love the restaurants and have eaten at restaurants because of your recommendation and found them enjoyable. The idea of not revealing yourself for so many years, was it simply because you believed it would be different if they knew who you were, or something else?
No, the funny thing about this, I mean, I've revealed myself.
Exactly.
To the cadre of New York cooks and restaurateurs whose restaurants I've been eating at for the last over a decade. They've known me
exactly. That's my point.
There's a restaurant. There's a restaurant called Le Perigord. I don't know if you've been. You've been to Perigord. Right. Perigord. My second week on the job, I went to Le Perigord. I thought I had done no food writing before. Nobody knew me. I went to Le Perigord. They had new chefs. I thought I'd go check it out, maybe write a review of Le Perigord. Le Perigord is a very classic old French restaurant, still there, near the UN in the 40s on the East Side. So I show up at lunch. I'm wearing a turtleneck. I've already figured out that it's very hard for me to disguise myself because I'm the size of a house. I have this giant head. Anyway, so I try to be discreet. I use a fake name. I show up at lunch. I'm waiting for my mother. So they lead me to a not very good table by the kitchen. And the maitre d', who's the owner, whose name escapes me, anyways, full tuxedo. He says, "Monsieur," he hands me this giant menu. So I open the giant menu and I say, I'm new to the job, and I say what I think you're supposed to say, which is, "What's good today?" And he goes, "You tell me, you're the critic." So that's 2 weeks into the job. In
Why you want to be anonymous?
I've always assumed they know.
No, they know. And also, it's their business to know. I mean, it's a very high-stakes game in New York, so they make it their business to know. And so, what you try to do is you try to, I described it as this kabuki dance. You go back and forth, and you pretend you're not there, and you discreetly try to order basically the whole menu.
Well, welcome to non-anonymity anymore. Now everyone knows who you are. Thanks for being here, Adam. Appreciate it.
Thank you.